I want to thank you, Ambassador, for joining us. If you can stay on for a bit, because we're also joined in studio by Bar-Yושפט from Stand With Us, and as we Israeli organization, fighting what we're seeing, what we're going to see over the course of the next week. You know, the campaign to call to deem Israel an apartheid.
The campaign to Israel. That's what it is. We call it the BDS by mistake. It's the campaign to destroy Israel. That's the goal of the movement. I have to say, I'm shocked. I think the discourse is already dead. But the fact that I have to say that I'm anything but a democracy, I've already lost the case. And that's exactly the goal for the movement to destroy Israel, which we mistakenly call the BDS. Now let's just be clear here. Israel proper, no one can argue that it is an apartheid state. When people are talking about Judea and Samaria, they're saying people who are not citizens of the state of Israel, nor do they want to be, otherwise we wouldn't have a conflict, don't have the same rights as me, an Israeli citizen. I don't also have the same rights as an American citizen, not an American citizen.
But what you call Judea and Samaria, and I'm arguing to you what people around the world would argue, you know, part of the Israeli community or the Israeli population calls it Judea and Samaria. The rest of the world internationally calls it the occupied territories.
I would argue that the movement to destroy Israel, the BDS movement, is
not
talking about the two-state solution. Hold on, we're talking about apartheid week. I've been to the campuses. They're not talking about Judea and Samaria. College students have no idea where Judea and Samaria, West Bank, call it whatever you want to call it. They have no idea where it is. They don't want Israel to exist on any border. And they're using the word apartheid to label Israel as something negative. That's it.
But putting the BDS into this mix, correctly so, which have a certain agenda, many will argue. That said, you used several minutes ago Judea and Samaria. The bulk of the world, the international community, refers to the West Bank as the occupied territory, as the occupied Palestinian territories. In that respect, within the West Bank, would you say that the policies by the controlling force, which is Israel, in that respect, are not demeaning to the population living there?
Well, I think I would say the opposite. Jews are not allowed to build houses in Judea and Samaria, especially in territory A and B. It's a death sentence if you sell your house to a Jew. So if you want to talk about if it's not appropriate, I would say that's much more severe. Now, I'm not saying everything is roses in Judea and Samaria, West Bank. We have a lot of issues. I think the main question that you need to ask is why? And to take the analogy from South Africa, two people who were citizens of a state, and compare it to a place where you have a conflict. A new nation was born pretty recently. It's a whole different story. Why do we have security checkpoints? We didn't have security checkpoints and then terror attacks. We had security checkpoints because of the terror attacks.
But pre-1967, and again, I'm going back to an area that is in dispute internationally by the international community. So if you go around, you stand on campuses, and you have to state the argument for Israel, right? How hard is that for you? When it comes to that area specifically, to what you call Judea and Samaria and the rest of it calls occupied territory.
So here's what I would argue. I would argue we have an inner discourse in Israel, which is wonderful, and also with the pro-Israel countries, which is wonderful, their approaches, but you have a discourse that's outside of Israel. The Apartheid Week is not talking about a two-state solution. They're anti-normalization. They don't want to have a dialogue with Israel. If Peace Now will go on a campus on the Apartheid Week, they will not engage in a dialogue with them. And that's what we don't understand. Now, you want to talk about international law? That's great. You have like, I don't know, 1,000 international legal experts who say there is no occupation. You also have 1,000 who say there is. We can talk about that, but that's a whole different story.
Actually, the international community is quite clear about the occupation existing.
Professor said that to compare the 6 tiny Article 49 for the Fourth Geneva Convention, but it's a whole different boring story. That's not the Apartheid Week. It's a very good for a country to have an inner discourse, but it has nothing to do with Israel Apartheid Week.
Yeah, the thing is, it's hard to have just an inner discourse, I think, in the internet age and not keep and have it come outside in many ways, because nothing is hidden today. But I want us to go quickly back to Ambassador Ilan Baruch, a former Israeli ambassador to South Africa. And Ambassador, if you're listening to the discussion also in the studio, the discussions that Israelis are having amongst themselves, is that conducive, is that helpful when it comes to the so-called, I would say, an image of Israel outside, because you can't really hide it anymore. I mean, you're going to have these discussions also internationally. And what can be done in that respect, because it is validating that the BDS movement is harming Israel and is actually making gains when it comes to its campaign.
Yes, BDS movement in South Africa is very strong, but I do want to stress a point. I am not for BDS, and the person speaking before, his name is Ran, and as much as him, also Prime Minister Netanyahu and the entire government are trying very hard to push people like me, who are critical of the occupation, into the BDS camp, and that is absolutely incorrect. And by the way, the argumentation of Ran is reminding us very much of the argumentation of the pro-apartheid white population in South Africa before apartheid was abolished. The entire world, in the eyes of the apartheid proponents, was against the white population, not against the immoral system that was put in place by the sheer use of force. And I think that we need to take a lesson from South Africa, even if we cannot compare the situation on the West Bank with South Africa one-to-one. But world putting pressure on us, that is very welcome. To change the Palestinian-Israeli relations from occupation into neighborhood. And that I call for and support very much.
I want to thank you, Ambassador. Ron, quickly to you, I think it's, it's a discussion that we're going to have amongst ourselves, amongst the Israeli population is going to have amongst itself. At the end of the day, though, something to contend with. The future for the West Bank, how do you see it?
So I just want to quickly, one thing I would actually argue that in Israel, it's a very wide tent. Again, from Peace Now to, I don't know, for Yesha, it's all pro-Israel. Mentioned this. So I disagree with what the ambassador said. I think it's a wide diversity of opinions, and it's all fine in our discourse. Second of all, people wanted the policies in South Africa. They did not want it to be exterminated. People call for Israel's to be destroyed. How will we solve?
One can argue that also not the entire Palestinian community calls for Israel to be destroyed.
No, I'm talking about the people who are promoting the apartheid week. I'm talking about the movement to destroy Israel, which we call the BDS movement. It's in there. They're not talking about a two-state solution. And it's fine that we want to have a two-state solution, or some people in the parliament, but it has nothing to do with that campaign.
But and because I have the music in my ear, sadly, we can discuss this as the region is forever. But I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Terminology will define this region. When we get back, Oscars.